Alright, so we talked about the roots of personality theory. Now we're going to talk about more modern personality theories and how we test those theories. So, more modern times now, we have more theories about personalities in terms of trait. So, when we're thinking about trait versus state, almost all of the theories are trait based now. And we're going to talk about three of the most popular ones. So, trait theories, several of them have been proposed for how traits make up personality. So, how many traits do we have, and what is the smallest number of traits possible that makes up our entire personality? And all of these theories kind of differ on the number of traits included. There's one theory that says there's only one trait that matters, and then there's other theories that say no, there's five, and then there's six, and then there's one that says there's 16. We're actually going to talk about the 5, 6, and 16 one. So the characteristics of traits for all of these theories say that internal dispositions are stable over time and across situation. So yes, we do behave differently over situations, and over time we learn, but these traits don't tend to change. They are who we are, and they influence how we act in situations. And they are conceived in bipolar terms. So what that means is it is a particular trait and you are either high in it or you are low in it. Or there is two different traits and they're opposite of each other. And so you can be one or the other. And it's seen as additive and dependent and independent. So you can be this trait, but that doesn't mean that you have to be this other trait too. So if you're high in this certain trait, that doesn't tell me anything about whether you're high in another trait or not. And it shows broad individual differences in socio-emotional functioning. So there is a bunch of different individual differences within traits. The first test, personality trait test that you guys are probably familiar with is the Myers-Briggs personality test. This one consists of 16 possible personalities, and it is based on 4 different areas. So the first letter in what you could possibly be is either an I or an E, and that stands for introversion versus extroversion. So this Myers-Briggs was based off of Carl Jung's work, which he was actually a neo-Freudian. He followed the work of Freud and came after Freud and thought that personality really involved these traits. So introversion and extroversion is the first one. So you're either an I or an E. And then you either focus on sensing your environment or your intuition in your environment. So that is the other one, or the second letter is an S or an N. And then the third letter is do you rely on thinking or do you rely on feeling? And so you'll be a T or an F. And then the fourth one, is judging versus perceiving. So do you judge the environment or do you perceive the environment? Do you observe or do you judge? So that's J versus P. And what we found, since this is a very, very widely used scale, it's probably one of the most popular personality tests. So researchers have tested it to see how reliable it is, and it is not a reliable or valid scale for personality. It is not reliable because you can take it multiple times and get different personalities. You can get INFP one time, and then you can get INTJ another time. And it's not valid because it doesn't accurately predict anything. It doesn't predict how well you'll do in school. It doesn't predict how well you'll do at a job. It doesn't predict how emotional you are. Like, it doesn't have any sort of prediction power about life outcomes at all. So, psychologists have pretty much determined that the Myers-Briggs personality test is not a reliable test for personality. The one that psychologists use the most is the 5-factor model. This is also called the Big Five, the Big Five personality. And this was created by McRae and Costa. And they said that personality theory that seems to describe the way people everywhere construe personality regardless of language or culture. That was the whole point of making this 5-factor model, is they wanted to construe personality and it be consistent throughout languages and culture. And there's many names for it. So there's the 5-factor model, the Big Five, and you can also think of it as the ocean of personality, because the 5 factors, Big Five, that means that there are 5 different traits within the model, and ocean is the acronym that you can use to remember them. So O is openness to experience, C is conscientiousness, E is extroversion, A is agreeableness, and N is neuroticism. And we'll talk about all of these separately in just a second. So this one does have validity. It does have some predictive power in certain aspects. Different traits of these do predict certain outcomes. So conscientiousness, for example, does predict academic performance and job performance. Neuroticism, actually, they're finding, weirdly enough, influences risk-taking behavior. So, openness to experience. If you're high on openness, you are original and imaginative and creative. You have a lot of different interests. You have a complex imagination, a complex way of thinking, and you're very, very curious about the world. So you're really open to experiencing new things. You're really open. You really want to learn more about your surroundings. You pursue knowledge. You pursue creativity. You pursue adventure. If you're low on O, you're more conventional. You're more down to earth. You're not as creative. You might have more narrow interests, and it's life's a bit simpler for you. So you're more traditional in this sense if you're low on O. So you like to keep things the way they always were. You like things to be consistent. And you don't like to branch out from what you already know. So people who have higher levels of O, higher levels are related to more fantasies, more nonconformity, more broad intellectual interests, but not a higher IQ, more experiences of absorptions in task, which is called flow. So you can get really caught up into what you're doing and not really realize how caught up you were in it or how much time's passing. That's what's called flow. And this is interesting, more intellectual interest but not higher IQ. This could be the creative intelligence the triarchic theory is stating, because that doesn't really get measured in IQ, does it? And then there's more reports of parapsychological phenomena from people who have more openness. So maybe they are more open to the idea that ghosts exist, or that people can be possessed by demons, or they're aliens, there's UFOs. So people with more openness believe these things more. And they use more humor to deal with stress. They laugh things off more. So then there's also conscientiousness, the C of ocean. If you have high C, you are conscientious. Whoa, conscientiousness, conscious. Which means that you're careful, you're reliable, you're well organized, you're self-disciplined, you're persevering. If you're low on C, you're more negligent, careless, undependable, disorganized, weak-willed, quitting, a little bit more impulsive, unreliable. So people with higher levels of C are related to better psychological well-being, because they are more well organized and reliable, so they have a more stable life. They have better scholastical achievement and job performance, because they're more reliable and self-disciplined. They're more organized approaches to tasks and to life. And then there's extroversion. So the opposite of extroversion is introversion, but what they're just measuring is just extroversion, if you're high in it or low on it. If you're low in it, that means you're more introverted, but we're just measuring extroversion, high or low. So if you're high, you're sociable, fun-loving, affectionate, friendly, spontaneous, talkative. If you're low, you're retiring, sober, reserved, aloof, inhibited, quiet. There are a lot of different opinions about what extroversion and introversion mean. Extroversion is people who gain energy from being around other people. And introversion, low extroversion, is people who gain their energy from being alone. So it's not that they don't like other people or being around other people, but they need that alone time to get their energy back. Being around people drains them, whereas extroverts, that's what makes them thrive. And if you're high on levels of E, you are more likely to be more talkative and have eye contact in social interactions. You might do more gambling and be more sexually permissive. You might have more positive affect, be happier. You're going to be a little less responsive to punishment. Punishment's not going to be as bad for you. And you'll have less physiological arousal, so you seek outside arousal. So what this means is it's not so easy to get you physically excited, so you might, be an adrenaline junkie. You might seek out skydiving or whitewater rafting, or drugs to make you feel something really arousing. And what's really interesting about this is extroverts are easier to sedate. Not entirely sure why this is. It might be an actual biological difference in the brain about extroverts versus introverts. Very interesting. The A is agreeableness. So if you're high on A, you're good-natured, you're soft-hearted, you're courteous, forgiving, sympathetic, agreeable. If you're low on A, you're a little irritable, ruthless, rude, vengeful, callous, and disagreeable. So, if you're too high on A, you can be like a pushover. But if you're too low on A, you could be really, really hard to get along with, like really hard to be friends with. So, higher levels of A are related to a better psychological well-being because it's easier to get along with you, more commitment to family and friends, more honesty, more ethics, more empathy, more patience, and more sincerity. That could be because they take into account other people a bit more. So I don't know if you guys are noticing this, but there are aspects of these traits where it is good to be high on some and low on others. And this brings me to N, neuroticism. This is definitely one of those, probably the most clear-cut one that is one side is good to be on, one side's bad to be on. So if you're high on neuroticism, you're worrying, you're nervous, you're high-strung, you're insecure, you're self-pitying, you're vulnerable. If you're low, you're calm, you're at ease, you're relaxed, you're secure, you're self-satisfied, and hearty. So neuroticism is really, are you worried? Are you really worried about what's going on? If you are low on it, you're cool as a cucumber most of the time. If you're high on it, you are easily stressed out. So higher levels are related to more distress in everyday life, and this could be not related to anything that's actually a stressor. So it could just be daily life just stresses you out, which is a sign of generalized anxiety disorder when you are stressed about common things in everyday life. You constantly worry about things in everyday life, and that would indicate high levels of neuroticism as well. So higher levels also have worse reactions to stressors. So they have a more exaggerated reaction to stressors than people with low neuroticism. It's not totally like a bad thing, but it can be. It can cause mental and physical well-being to go down. They tend to have more negative affect because they're worrying all the time, they're nervous, they're insecure, so they're always thinking about the negatives in life. And they have more health complaints. That could be because they're constantly stressed. As we learned, constant stress affects our health directly. So, if you are high in neuroticism and you're constantly worrying, you're constantly stressed out, you probably are going to have a bad immune response, and you probably will have more health issues. And they have more awkwardness socially. And this could possibly also due to being more high-strung and insecure. They're questioning themselves more, and they put more pressure on themselves to do well in social situations, whereas someone who's calm and relaxed is going to be fine, you know? Yeah, I'm just going to talk to these people, whatever. So then there is the Hexaco model. This is the third trait theory model that I'm going to talk about, and it is very, very similar to the 5-factor model, like really similar. This is Ashton and Lee's 6-factor model, so there's 6 of them instead of 5. So the exaco of it, minus the H, the EXACO, are all the same factors of the 5-factor model. These factors don't change. So What they did is just slightly reworded them. So emotionality is now neuroticism, and extroversion is now the X, which is silly. So yeah, now they have extroversion as an X, agreeableness, conscientiousness, and openness. All the same. But what they add is honesty and humility at the beginning of it. They said there is one more factor that the 5-factor model isn't getting at, and that's honesty and humility. So they needed to add that. So if you're high on H, you're more genuine and trustworthy, and humble and fair. But if you're low on it, you're arrogant and egotistical and greedy and insincere. But Costa and McCrae, the guys who founded the 5-factor model, don't buy this difference. They say that that isn't a big enough difference from their model. They actually argue that the honesty and humility could just go into the agreeableness category. So, what do you think about that? Do you think that this is a worthy new category? Do these factors touch on being genuine and humble and trustworthy and fair? Or could they go into those?